After much hesitation, he finally chose to visit the mistress's courtyard. I calmly lifted the brush and signed my name on the divorce paper. He wept, choking on his words. "Mingzhu, can't you be like other women, endure a little, so we can stay together?" I looked up and answered. "Staying with you, would my life ever cease to be bitter?" Shinru froze, the tear at the corner of his eye stilled, his body unmoving, speechless. "I am Gua Mingzhu, 23 this year. 8 years of marriage, yet still without a child. My husband, the heir of the Marquis household, is named Shinru. On the day of our betrothal, he swore that I would be the only one beside him for life. But 8 years later, he has a mistress." Little maid Xiaomia grumbled, "Didn't the heir once say you were the only one he'd ever need? Then why does a lifetime last only 8 years for him?" I sipped my milk and sighed. "Still longer than most men's promises." Xiaomia, unable to hold back her anger, grabbed the prescription Madame had given and asked, "Then from now on, my lady, you won't be drinking these anymore, will you?" I nodded. Delighted, she poured all the medicine at the foot of a tree and even stomped on it a few times. I couldn't help but laugh. "Don't be angry, Mia. Your lady won't let you suffer any losses. Since marrying Shinru 8 years ago, I have set aside my own temperament, living dutifully as a proper wife of the Shin household. I did not grow arrogant from being loved, nor complacent from his affection, even though he once said he loved me." A year after our marriage, when I still hadn't conceived, Madame invited the physician to examine me. The physician said I was perfectly able to bear children, yet Madame still handed me medicine to help conception. For 7 years I swallowed those bitter draughts, praying for a child. 3 months ago, when Shinru began spending nights with his mistress, I finally stopped. Since then, I've drunk only the milk sent from the Gua family. Bitter medicine to seek a child, sweet milk to nourish the body. Shinru often asked if life with him was sweet. I always answered honestly, sweet. Yet in my heart, I added silently, the medicine tastes bitter. He knew the bitterness of the medicine. Madame, to be fair, had also called a physician for him in our 3rd year of marriage. The physician said he could have children, so she too gave him medicine to aid conception. For 8 years, we shared the same cups of bitterness in our pursuit of a child. By the 8th year, I had grown sick of the taste, and he wearied of it too. He often poured the medicine away in secret, sometimes even mine. When Madame discovered it, she couldn't bear to force him further. So she thought of introducing another woman to him, arranging a chance meeting between the two. Perhaps it was out of filial piety, or perhaps he had grown weary of the bitter medicine, or maybe his heart had already wavered for that woman. 3 months ago, after much hesitation, Shinru finally stepped into her courtyard. From that day on, he and I no longer met. At first, he avoided me out of guilt. Later, when he wished to see me, I was the one who avoided him. Recently, upon hearing that the mistress was pregnant, Shinru panicked. He rushed to see me, wanting to give her a title, to give the child legitimacy. He came prepared, with reasons, with tears, and with affection, hoping to keep everything intact. Xiaomia asked me, "Will you be like those long-suffering wives, enduring the pain to keep the household in order for your husband?" I looked at her, handed her the divorce paper. She let out a breath of relief. A daughter of the Gua family, how could she yield so easily? Still, Mia didn't believe I would truly let go of Shinru. She asked tentatively, "My lady, can you really part with him? Even if he has a mistress, the young master will surely still treat you well." I smiled faintly. I believe that. I was the first woman Shinru ever loved, and through the years I have treated him with all my sincerity. Letting go of me will be difficult for him. But what he wants, I continued, is not to let me go. He wants both me and the new woman. He chooses what benefits him most, even if it means I must bear all the loss. I turned to Mia and asked softly, "If he no longer visits me as he once did, but spends his days in her courtyard, would you still call that good treatment?" If he wants me to accept her child as my own, to raise it as mine, what then? Would you still say he treats me well? Mia turned pale at my words. I smiled. Now do you believe me? She nodded quickly. Go tell Uncle Chu we'll be returning home soon, I said. And tell Song Gang to send the invitation and prepare the divorce procedure. Mia obeyed, her steps light, her face bright with joy, relieved that her lady was finally leaving the Shin household. She wasn't the only one. Uncle Chu and Song Gang also moved with astonishing speed. Within 3 days, everything was settled. Shinru, do you see? Everyone rejoices at my departure. Mia urged me, my lady, it's time to meet the young master. I nodded, steadying my heart. On my wedding day, I had my parents and brothers by my side. But on the day of my divorce, I must stand alone. While waiting, to keep my nerves in check, I let my thoughts drift back to the past. 8 years ago, I was still a young, naive girl. My second brother, who handled intelligence matters, learned that the Empress intended to select me as the Crown Prince's consort. He rushed to warn me. Sister, we can't let you enter the palace. The Crown Prince is cruel and hideous. I smiled mischievously. Then let father and mother decide what's best for Mingzhu. Mother took charge. On my coming-of-age day, she hosted a grand banquet, inviting families from all directions. When I entered the hall, my appearance caused a stir. Countless young men, accompanying their mothers, could not take their eyes off me. Among them, Shinru was the most ardent and the most handsome. He was the heir of a marquisate. Mother asked me what I thought of him. I met his dark eyes and blushed. Father immediately sent someone to investigate his background. My eldest brother was pleased. Shinru has only one mother, and she's an easygoing woman. The clan ties are simple. He's gentle, with no bad habits, a fine match indeed. The third brother hesitated. But the Marquis household is declining. If she marries there, life might not be comfortable. The second brother grew anxious. We must decide quickly. At the next palace banquet, the Empress will request the betrothal decree. My parents hurried to agree. We'll prepare a generous dowry so Mingzhu can live comfortably all her life. The fourth brother frowned. And what if Shinru turns out to be unworthy? The fifth brother said confidently, don't worry. Fa and I already checked, he vowed not to marry before 25. If Mingzhu's marriage turns sour, she can divorce, and I'll handle everything. The eldest brother praised him. A thoughtful plan indeed. My marriage came about in haste, but there was no other choice. I could not enter the palace. Not because I despised the Crown Prince's ugliness, but because I was never suited for that place. To enter the palace was to step into danger, to count down the days to ruin. I was not raised as other noble daughters were. After bearing 5 sons, mother had no intention of having more children. But her bond with father was deep. Once her health recovered, she couldn't help but draw him close again. And so, when my fifth brother had just learned to walk, I was conceived. Father fondly called the swell of her belly little Six. When I was born a girl, he was astonished and overjoyed. He stood over my cradle, unable to look away. Mother gently reminded him, raising a daughter isn't like raising sons. A girl mustn't suffer. Father nodded. Then she won't learn martial arts. Mother pointed to the scars across her belly from childbirth. When a girl marries and bears children, the pain never ends. Father, remembering her screams during labor, shuddered. He told her, then our daughter will never have to marry. As long as we live, we'll care for her. When we're gone, our sons will protect her. And so my upbringing was decided. Since there was no plan to marry me off, my education was unlike that of any noble lady. My parents taught me that the world imposed countless rules, but I had the right to choose which ones would bind me. Mother whispered to me in secret, if there's a man you want, choose him. If not, never trouble yourself with marriage at all. They wanted me to live freely and unrestrained. But they forgot, father held high office, and my brothers were all accomplished men. How could I possibly escape a marriage arranged by such a family? Though father never sent me to the palace and mother kept me from attending banquets, claiming I was too proud and unsuited for managing household affairs, the empress still set her sights on me. When the news arrived, my family realized that a daughter of the Gua household could no longer avoid marriage, worse yet, it would happen soon. They hastily hired tutors to teach me the duties of a noble wife. My female instructor was a wise woman. She taught me how to see through fate, understand cause and effect, guard my own heart, protect my boundaries, and know when to hold on and when to let go. None of it had to do with palace intrigue or inner court rivalries. She said, struggling only harms yourself. If you can, avoid conflict. Then she added, and if you must deal with someone impossible to avoid, simply stay away from him. I quietly remembered her every word. The empress had her eye on me. Shinru pursued me fervently. The marriage was decided swiftly. Before the arrangements were finalized, father summoned Shinru for a talk. He warned, my daughter Mingzhu is not a woman who follows convention. I've taught her to respect her elders, but not to endure injustice. If your mother seeks to impose strict rules, it won't be easy. Shinru promised, I will never allow my mother to pressure Mingzhu like other mothers-in-law do. She need only fulfill her role as my wife. Father cooled his eagerness with a single sentence, we've taught Mingzhu that if her husband treats her well, she'll return it in kind. But if he does not, she may divorce him. Shinru vowed earnestly, I will never treat Mingzhu poorly. Father sighed. The world is too harsh on women. Her mother and I have taught her to live a little selfishly. Shinru smiled. Before me, she may be as selfish as she pleases. Father murmured, we never planned to marry her off. A married woman suffers, inevitably. Shinru answered, marriage brings pain only depending on the man. If she marries me, she will not suffer. Father agreed at last, though mother remained uneasy. The night before the wedding, she held me close and wept, fearing Shinru might lack gentleness and cause me pain on our wedding night. Unwilling to let me suffer, she invited a seasoned matron to teach me how to find pleasure without pain. I had expected that night to be one of agony. But in truth, after the first brief discomfort, it was mostly bliss. Shinru trembled, while I enjoyed it far more than he did. That was when I learned the advantage of marriage. Shinru said he was lucky to have moved quickly enough to marry me. After our wedding, we lived harmoniously. I was no expert in domestic chores, so his mother gladly took charge of the household. Everyone was content in their role. When my parents saw how radiant I became after marriage, they were at ease. They and my brothers left for the western frontier, troubled by war, where His Majesty required stationed troops. Knowing I remained in the capital, the emperor felt assured in sending my family away. Before leaving, mother reminded me that as a wife, I must nurture the Shin family. I nodded obediently. Each of my brothers, however, warned Shinru in turn. We protect the nation, and our sister remains at home. You must treat her well, or we'll return and deal with you ourselves. Shinru promised each one solemnly. That night, he came to me seeking comfort. He said softly, your brothers terrify me. I stroked his cheek and teased, then I'll make it up to you. And I kissed him first, gently, tenderly. Soon, Shinru melted like water in my arms. In my memory, there were days when we were truly happy. He treated me kindly, and I laid aside my pride, fulfilling my role as the wife of the Shin household. We lived in harmony, but good things never last. In the end, Shinru betrayed me. He took a mistress. The first day he went to her, I already knew. He made excuses to leave, visiting her for 3 consecutive days. When he returned, I said nothing. At first, guilt kept him from seeing me. Days later, realizing I remained calm, he dared to approach again. I always found an excuse not to meet him. Once, twice, then thrice. In his eagerness to legitimize the mistress, he began visiting me more often. Over 3 months, I refused to see him 40 times. On the 41st attempt, when he thought I would reject him again, I sent Nia to summon him. Shinru arrived, overjoyed, and upon seeing me, burst into tears. "Mingzhu, at last, you're willing to see me." He rarely cried, but after 8 years of marriage, he knew tears easily softened my heart. Whenever I was upset, a few drops would make me forgive him. But not this time. When he reached for my hand, I quietly drew away. Lowering my gaze, I said softly, "Shinru, let's divorce." He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "You knew, didn't you? You knew everything, didn't you?" And so, at last, we stood face to face, confronting the most painful truth of our marriage. I didn't deny it. I nodded gently. "Yes. The very first day you went to her, I already knew. That was the hardest day of my life." I stood not far behind, watching him. He entered and left the mistress's courtyard several times, and each time I silently prayed he wouldn't go in. But I saw him step through that door with my own eyes. Mia wanted to rush forward and drag him back. I stopped her. If his heart has already changed, pulling him back won't hold him. Song Gang, standing nearby, nodded in agreement. Shinru once swore before my father and brothers, but he never understood them. They were never men who believed in empty promises. Before leaving for the frontier, they hadn't just assigned Song Gang, my shadow guard, to watch over me, they also left others to ensure my safety and help me with anything I needed. From the day I entered the Shin household, I was never truly alone. Following my brother's instructions, I said nothing to Shinru. It was a blessing I kept silent. Had I spoken, I could never have prepared everything so thoroughly. The moment he stepped into that woman's courtyard, I had already begun arranging the divorce. I waited until today to present it, only because I wanted to give myself time to think, to ensure I wouldn't regret a rash decision. But pain made my resolve stronger. Shinru rose to his feet, panic in his eyes, his voice trembling. "Mingzhu, it wasn't what I wanted. I only did it to please my mother. She's longed to hold a grandchild for years." Madame Shin was not a cruel woman. In all 8 years of our marriage, she had never once interfered with our affection. For that, I had always been grateful. As a single mother, she'd conducted herself with dignity and care. The Shin family lacked for nothing. I thought the least I could do was help fulfill her wish. I took out the divorce paper I'd already signed and handed it to him. "You're a filial son. Congratulations, you fulfilled your mother's wish. Now grant mine." Without even glancing at it, Shinru snatched the paper and tore it to pieces. His eyes blazed red as he shouted, "Your wish. If it's to spend our lives together, I'll grant it. But if it's divorce, forget it." I'd expected this. 8 years of affection aren't easily severed. It had taken me 3 months to let go. For him, it was only the beginning. I knew this divorce wouldn't be easy. I was ready for that. Sitting down, I accepted a glass of milk from Mia and took a sip. For the past 3 months, whenever emotions overwhelmed me, milk had been my calm. After a deep breath, I said quietly, "The day you went to her, I was right behind you." Shinru froze. "You were behind me." I nodded. He pressed, "Then why didn't you stop me?" I took another sip, answering calmly, "Would it have mattered?" The look in my eyes must have struck him. He seemed to awaken, then crumpled again, hopeless. He stammered, "You didn't need to stop me. I was only with her 3 times. Just 3 times in my entire life. 3 times. I laughed, bitterly, helplessly. Still, I forced myself to finish the milk before speaking again, to hold on to what little composure I had left. "Shinru," I said, "between us, there is only one path left, divorce." He opened his mouth to speak, but I stopped him, raising my hand. Let me finish. Cry if you must, but I know you don't want divorce. You just want me to accept her as a concubine. I tried, you know. The day you entered her courtyard, I tried to make myself accept it. I tried for 3 months. But I can't. Truly, I can't. Only by leaving can I go on living. Please don't force me to stay, or I'll lose my mind, or die. My voice trembled, but I continued. For those 3 days you spent with her, every day I thought about ending my life. Everything was out in the open. I hadn't meant to tell him the depth of my despair, but if that was the only way to end it, then so be it. Shinru went pale, trembling all over, horror in his eyes. There was no way back for us. The sword had already fallen, only the final strike remained. He opened his mouth and coughed up blood. At that moment, Madame Shin, who had been eavesdropping nearby, burst into the room. She was the second obstacle in this divorce. Once, she'd cared for me. But not anymore. She wanted us divorced, yet she couldn't bear her son's suffering, nor could she let the family's reputation be stained. Weighing her options, she decided it was best if I endured and remained the dutiful wife of the Shin family. But I refused. Her temper flared. While attendants rushed to help Shinru up and call for the physician, she turned to me, her voice thick with anger and grief. Mingzhu, she said, I never thought you'd be so heartless, using the threat of death to force Shinru's hand. How could you be so selfish? Have you no thought for him? Shinru is 25, heir to a great lineage. He bears the duty of continuing the family line. How can you not understand his responsibility, or his pain? You truly are cold-blooded, Madame Shin said sharply. You keep bringing up that mistress. She's not an outsider, she's Shinru's cousin, named Lu Yun. She grew up with him, their bond runs deep. She's devoted to him, willing to serve you faithfully even as a concubine. Why can't you be generous enough to accept a modest woman who only wishes to continue the family line? Besides, the child will bear your surname, raised under your name. You'll have the joy of a family without the burden. Why must you be so stubborn, so unfeeling, so unwilling to understand human compassion? She scolded endlessly, never once mentioning Shinru's vows, nor the wounds he had inflicted on me. I knelt and bowed to her. Madam, you're right, I am selfish. That's why I cannot stay in the Shin household any longer. Please persuade Shinru to grant me a divorce. There's no need for further explanation. We've become two different people. I only ask to part peacefully. Madame Shin had not expected me to yield so quietly. My calm placed her in a difficult position. Losing patience, she burst out. Divorce. What are you scheming? You'd have me play the villain who breaks up this marriage. Do you think it's so simple? You've been married 8 years, how can you say divorce as if it's nothing? I raised my head, voice steady. Madame Shin, I won't say much. You've been the only wife in this household for decades. More than anyone, you should understand why I must leave. Her face froze, struck as if by an old wound. Her complexion paled, eyes flickering with memories she'd rather forget. After a long silence, she composed herself but still protested bitterly. But love isn't something you can just stop feeling. If you walk away, have you thought what will become of Shinru? I replied evenly. When you pushed him toward Lu Yun, did you think what would become of him afterward? You've already considered everything, haven't you? You guessed that even if I left, Shinru would recover in time. Shinru's face turned deathly pale. He couldn't withstand it, and fainted. Seeing her son cough up blood and collapse, Madame Shin panicked. His reaction had far exceeded her expectations. She gritted her teeth and asked. Guamingzhu, must you really go through with this divorce? Is there truly no turning back? I answered firmly. Yes. It was you who destroyed our future. According to the written vow made years ago, if he ever took another woman, I would have the right to divorce. The magistrate sealed that agreement himself. Everyone witnessed it. My unshakable resolve drove her into fury. She pointed at me, shouting, "An agreement. That's your excuse. Guomingzhu, do you still think you're the highborn daughter of a general's household? Don't you know your place now? Once, you had your parents and brothers to protect you, but who do you have left? You only have Shinru, only the Shin family." Her words cut deep, every syllable meant to strike where it hurt most. Shinru stirred awake just in time to hear her, and the color drained from his face again as he fainted once more. 8 years ago, countless young nobles had sought my hand. Back then, Shinru was only 17. In his haste, he offered every precious thing from his household as betrothal gifts. But that wasn't enough to satisfy my parents and brothers. My 5th brother had a close friend since childhood. Seeing the situation, that friend said to him, "No need for such fuss. Let me marry Mingzhu instead." But his identity was complicated. My brother refused. "Unless there's no other way, I dare not involve you." The friend sighed and left. Still, the betrothal gifts didn't meet my family's expectations. Rumors spread that my brother's friend was willing to intervene, and Shinru grew desperate. He did the unthinkable. In front of his peers and my entire family, he swore that I would be his only wife, he would never take a concubine as long as he lived. He didn't stop there. He wrote a contract, stating that if he ever took another woman, I would have the right to divorce him. He would repay my dowry twofold, and he himself would sign the divorce paper, waiting only for my signature. His gesture moved everyone. My parents and brothers finally agreed to the match. That was why I had once loved him wholeheartedly. But the sincerity that once moved me was eventually buried by time, replaced by years of bitterness and the emptiness of childlessness. Still, after 8 years of shared life, I couldn't be completely heartless. So when I prepared the divorce, I drafted 2 versions. 1, a simple, peaceful separation. Each goes their own way. No demands, no compensation. I would only reclaim my dowry. Madame Shin did not hesitate to press her hand upon my deepest wound. Yes, she was right. I no longer had parents. No longer had brothers. They had all fallen on the battlefield in the 7th year after my marriage, sacrificing their lives for a century of peace under the great Shang dynasty. My family had been pillars of the realm, heroes of the nation. But in Madame Shin's eyes, I was now an orphan, without protection, easily controlled. It was from that year onward that she began to change. Before, she would only complain about my inability to bear children. But because my parents still lived, she treated me kindly, comforting me that health mattered more, and that children would come in time. When my parents died, her mask fell. She not only gossiped behind my back but sneered at me to my face. Worse, she began urging Shinru to take a concubine. He resisted, but she threatened suicide. In the end, he could no longer defy her. 3 months ago, she wept and begged him. She said the physician had claimed both he and I were fertile, but who could be sure? She pleaded for him to spend one night with his cousin Lu Yun. If no child came of it, she would give up. Shinru hesitated. At last, he yielded. He spent 3 nights with Lu Yun. A month later, she was with child. Madame Shen laughed aloud. See, Shinru. Lu Yun conceived after only 3 nights of affection. You've been with Guomingzhu 8 years and she's born nothing. Do you see now how many years you've wasted? Shinru said nothing. The wheel of fate had already turned. From that day on, our marriage was doomed. When I looked into Madame Shin's cold, triumphant eyes, I knew there was nothing left in me to soften. I raised my gaze toward the great tree in the courtyard, where one of my hidden guards stood watch. It was time. Seeing I would not yield, Lu Yun, who had been eavesdropping outside, panicked and burst in. She fell to her knees before me, kowtowing desperately. Sister Mingzhu, she cried, it's my fault. Please don't make things hard for Madam or Brother Shinru. Please let me stay in the household. I don't wish to take your place or seek a title. I only wish to serve you both, to care for you and him. The child in my womb, I'll give it to you. Every child I bear will be yours. Tears streamed down her face as she begged. Madam Shin, overcome with pity, lifted her up and turned to me with fury in her eyes. Kue Mingzhu. How could you be so cruel, forcing a pregnant woman to kneel before you? You truly are the most heartless woman alive. Shinru, wake up. Look for yourself, only Lu Yun truly loves you. She screamed in outrage. Shinru stirred awake, but he did not respond as she expected. He didn't defend them. He only looked at me, searching my face for some trace of affection, some flicker of hesitation. But he found nothing. Panic seized him. He pushed his mother and Lu Yun aside, eyes red and brimming with tears. This time, they were not the tears he used to manipulate me. He sobbed, voice trembling. Mingzhu, I swear, I only wanted to give my mother a grandchild. I never felt anything for Lu Yun. The only one I've ever loved is you. I was wrong. I see it now. I won't make the same mistake again. Please, please forgive me. His bloodshot eyes glistened with desperation and guilt. Even after all the pain he'd caused me, after 8 years together, I couldn't bring myself to be completely merciless. Softly, I said. Shinru, don't say you love only me anymore. Look around you. I gestured slowly, to his mother, whose eyes burned with resentment, to Lu Yun, trembling yet calculating, and finally to the swelling in her belly. Tell me, I said quietly, how can you say you love only me? He followed my gaze, from one to the next, until realization struck. He screamed, voice breaking. Who are you? Why are you here? This courtyard belongs to me and Mingzhu, what gives you the right to step in? We lived peacefully, why must you interfere? Madam Shin and Lu Yun froze in shock. They had never seen Shinru so distraught. Nor had I. But I knew, his anguish was the consequence of his own choices. At this point, there was no one left to blame. His mother hadn't forced him to sleep with Lu Yun 3 times. He had chosen to obey. Those 3 times were proof enough of the change in his heart. I felt weary, too tired to keep watching this pitiful act of sorrow. My gaze drifted toward the courtyard gate. Why hadn't he arrived yet? Sensing my impatience, Shinru must have realized something was wrong. Sweat beaded on his forehead. In panic, he rushed to lock the gate. His eyes were wild, terrified. Mingzhu, who are you waiting for? Someone to help you file the divorce. I met his gaze calmly and nodded. He steadied himself for a heartbeat, but then madness overtook him again. He grabbed my shoulders and shook me violently. No. No, impossible. Don't even dream of it. Mingzhu, I won't let you leave me. His eyes gleamed with hysteria, frightening even his mother and Lu Yun. My vision spun from his shaking. I steadied myself, pushed him away, and said coldly. Shinru, stop this madness. I rubbed my temple, glanced at Lu Yun clutching her belly, and added. Don't lose your mind. Go take care of your child. That single sentence shattered the last glimmer of hope in him. He screamed, voice breaking. The child, you don't care about the child anymore. You truly don't love me at all. I averted my gaze, eyes fixed again on the gate. Mingzhu. Who are you waiting for? Who else do you think you have besides me? He yanked at my arm so hard I nearly fell. Of course, me, came a calm voice. The gate burst open with a crash. I stepped aside, my heart finally light. Lu Qizhi, Deputy Minister of Justice, entered with his attendants. Everyone in the Shin household was struck dumb. Without wasting a single word, Lu Qizhi strode forward and read aloud the divorce decree, stamped with the magistrate's seal, and the full record of my dowry. When he finished, he reminded Shinru of the clause. According to the written contract, Shinru was obligated to repay twice the amount. Shinru was no longer mad. He stood frozen, trembling, his voice hoarse. In a single day, Mingzhu, you've dragged me from heaven to hell. There's no way back. I acted as if I hadn't heard. Madame Shin shrieked, hysterical. No. No. How could there be such a heartless woman in this world? He only took a concubine, and you'd ruin our entire family for it. Lu Yun stood motionless, utterly shattered. How can there be a divorce decree like this? She whispered. Lu Qiji caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. I smiled faintly in return. I was the vicious supporting character. I had awakened in this world during the first year of marriage. I remembered everything. I had once been a modern woman who'd left harsh comments under a web novel, criticizing its outdated morality. Because of my relentless criticisms, I'd been thrown into the novel itself, reborn as its so-called villainess. But my villainy was never like the others. They schemed and poisoned and lied. I was called vicious simply because I refused to sacrifice myself for a man. The author had written me as a selfish woman, one who failed to meet her mother-in-law's expectations, who wouldn't pander to her husband's desires, who wouldn't bow to society's definition of virtue. Unlike the heroine Lu Yun, who, though without title or love, still longed to bear her cousin's child, I refused to accept such sanctimonious ideals. I couldn't tolerate that ideology. So I attacked the author directly. My words ignited a storm. Others began to agree with me, questioning the author, calling her a relic of feudal decay. Finally, the author responded, furious. She pointed to my comment and said, "Then go live it yourself. Let's see if that world will change your mind." A single sentence, and I was thrown into the book. When I awoke, I began to plan. The divorce document, once merely a token of faith, was secretly filed and sealed by the magistrate under my orders. Using the shadow guards my eldest brother had left behind, I kept watch over every move Shinru made. I sent a letter to father's old steward, asking Uncle Chu to come manage my inherited estates and personal assets. Once everything was in place, I lived quietly beside Shinru, waiting for the moment the story would unfold as written. For the day he betrayed me. 1 year passed. Then 2. Then 3. By the 6th year, he still treated me tenderly. I began to wonder, had my presence changed the plot? But in the 7th year, the northern tribes rose in rebellion. My parents and brothers fought valiantly for the empire, and every one of them fell in battle. I became an orphan, just as the story foretold, only 3 years later than it should have happened. Shinru stayed by my side, comforting me. But his mother's patience was not infinite. Though he claimed loyalty, that loyalty crumbled the moment pressure came from her. He yielded, weak and compliant, revealing the cowardice buried deep in his nature. When I saw his patience begin to fade, I realized I could no longer endure. My parents and brothers had wanted one thing for me. That I live well. I must live, and live well. If I stayed beside Shinru, I would never truly live. So I returned to the Gua estate. My parents were gone, yet I was still here. This was my home. When I arrived, the servants my parents had left behind surrounded me, their eyes wet with joy, unable to speak. After my parents' passing, I had never dismissed them. They remained at the Gua estate, loyal to Uncle Chu's management. I went back to my old courtyard. Uncle Chu's eyes glistened when he saw me. "My lady, you've finally come home. The manor has hope again." I smiled softly. "Uncle Chu, better days are ahead." 3 days later, my dowry was returned in full, not a single piece missing. The Shin family also had to compensate me as the contract required. I heard Madame Shin had made a scene, tearing her hair and screaming to stop them. But the Ministry of Justice does not bow to tantrums. They brought a full team, carefully inspecting every item on my dowry list, nearly emptying the Shin residence. When Madame Shen finally looked around at the stripped halls, she was stunned. Too late for regret. She couldn't comprehend how, over a mere concubine, her family's fortune had been wiped away. Lu Yun, too, was shaken. All her cautious patience, her years of quiet scheming to enter the Shen household, she thought happiness was within reach. But in a blink, it all crumbled to dust. As for Shenru, he watched silently as my dowry was carried away one chest after another. He didn't try to stop them. He only held the divorce paper in his trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. His name, written 8 years ago, was faded. Mine, freshly inked, stood sharp and dark. The date carved into that document, 3 months ago, cut like a blade. It was the day he first visited Lu Yun. The divorce decree was clear. The day he stepped into another woman's courtyard was the day he stepped out of my life. 3 months ago, we had already ended. And yet, he had still dreamed of harmony between wife and concubine. Now, looking at that document, I almost laughed. He had underestimated my resolve, and never understood the love General Gua had for his daughter. My father had never truly believed that Shenru could stay faithful for life. Not because he distrusted him, but because he distrusted this era. This was an age that gave men too many privileges. Everyone said it was natural for men to take multiple wives and concubines. So how could any man raised under such thinking remain loyal to one woman forever? It was too rare. Too impossible. No matter how sincere Shenru had seemed, father had never believed. He had planned ahead, quietly striking an agreement with the Ministry of Justice and the Court of Judicature. His only condition, if ever I wished to divorce, they would help me. It wasn't a difficult request, and both parties had agreed. Once I understood that, I sent Song Gang with an invitation and went to see the deputy minister myself. Lu Qiji did not waste words. He immediately ordered his men to assist. Lu Qiji, sharp-minded, decisive. He was the illegitimate son of a duke, but he had risen by his own merit to his current position. When we met, his eyes were like a hawk's, cutting through pretense. So, you truly wish to divorce Shenru? After 8 childless years, by law he has the right to cast you aside. Promises come first, I said, taking out the old contract. The clause was clear. Without that promise, my parents would never have let me marry him. How could a marquis' heir of a declining house wed a general's legitimate daughter otherwise? I added quietly. He smirked. Fair enough. Even I, a man of far greater promise, wouldn't have dared dream of marrying General Gua's daughter. His shameless confidence made me laugh despite myself. He studied me for a long while, then examined the contract carefully. To be honest, he said, Shenru isn't exactly a villain. 8 years without a child, he waited long before taking a concubine to continue the line. It's not unreasonable. You truly cannot endure. I cannot, I said firmly. He clenched his jaw. Frankly, he broke his word, yes, but he's not beyond redemption. Are you truly unable to compromise? I shook my head without hesitation. After a moment of silence, he sighed. Once divorced, remarriage won't be easy. You know that, don't you? The Great Shang dynasty allows women to divorce, but to remarry is near impossible. Shenru isn't the worst man alive. His words made me laugh again. Thank you for the warning, Lord Lu. I have thought it through, and I have no regrets. I neither want Shenru nor fear the loneliness ahead. Can you help me? Seeing my determination, he finally took up the seal and pressed it onto the divorce document, officially filing it. When he handed it back, he said, Take it. But be ready, even with this paper, Shenru won't let you go easily. I've heard much about his feelings for you. I smiled faintly. Rumors are unreliable. He's too busy preparing for the child his mistress carries. Lu Qiji frowned. Not necessarily. I'm a man, I know. If he wrote such a contract, he must have loved you deeply. I gave a polite bow and turned to leave. His voice called out behind me. Madam Shin is not easy to deal with. I've heard that beneath the lotus pond of the Shin estate lie more than a few corpses. My heart tightened. I'd thought those were just rumors. In that instant, I turned back and changed my plan. Please, Deputy Minister, lend me your help, I said quietly. I value my life. Before he could refuse, I offered terms. If the Ministry of Justice retrieves my dowry and the compensation owed, I will keep my dowry, but the compensation I'll donate entirely to your office. Song Gang had once mentioned that the ministry was short on funds for a major case. At those words, Lu Qiji brightened instantly. He reported the matter to the minister himself, who, delighted, approved the request at once. Everything proceeded swiftly. By the next day, Shinru and I had officially finalized our divorce. The return of my dowry was unusually fast. The ministry acted with remarkable force this time. Everyone was frightened, even Madame Shin. It was said that Lu Qiji merely paused to glance at the lotus pond. And Madame Shin, trembling, ordered the treasury opened. Afterward, I invited Lu Qiji to dinner. I gifted him 500 taels of silver and several gold hairpins, wishing him good fortune in finding a suitable match. He accepted cheerfully. Whatever you give, I'll take. And if you ever need help again, I'll see it through to the end. I appreciated that kind of straightforward transaction. Men like him, once they promise, they keep their word. I poured him wine, served his dishes. He drank too much and laughed loudly. You truly aren't an ordinary woman. The daughter of General Gua, ruthless indeed. 8 years of marriage, and you leave nothing behind. Who would dare deceive you now? I only smiled, picking food into his bowl. He hiccuped, muttering, after this, I doubt any man will have the courage to marry you. I chuckled, refilled his cup, and when he finally slumped over the table in drunken sleep, I had Uncle Chu escort him back to the ministry. He lived in his own quarters there. He and the Duke were estranged. The Duke had married Princess Chengel, elevating her maid to concubine. Now, he had only 2 daughters, one by the princess, one by the concubine. Lu Qiji, though illegitimate, was the Duke's only son. Not a blessed position, but a precious one nonetheless. And people say, when you accept a gift, you must repay it in kind. From the day he accepted my thank you gift, Lu Qiji began visiting often. Aside from the divorce, I had nothing to ask of him. But he insisted, I've accepted your generosity, I should at least be of use. I lived alone now in the vast general's residence. Having someone to watch over me wasn't such a bad thing. I told him, Uncle Chu handles my affairs. If anything happens, I'll send for you. He smiled slyly. It's not the same. How so? He pointed to the insignia on his robe. I have this. The seal of the Ministry of Justice. I nodded. True, Uncle Chu doesn't have that. He leaned closer, his breath brushing my cheek. And I'm young, quick in every matter. Can Uncle Chu compare? I instinctively stepped back, bowing my head slightly. I'll be relying on you then, Lord Lu. His eyes gleamed with amusement. Gladly. From now on, your business is mine as well. I thought silently to myself, may there be nothing more for him to involve himself in. After the divorce, I grew healthier, rounder. Uncle Chu was delighted. My lady, you're more beautiful than ever, he said, laughing. So, do you plan to find another husband? I smiled. No. This is enough. With you, Mia, and Song Gang, 4 of us are plenty. He beamed. Since you married, the general worried endlessly that your husband might mistreat you. If he could see you now, he'd be proud. I lifted my eyes to the sky. My father was nowhere to be seen. But the sunlight was dazzling. Mia, too, had grown cheerful again. Back in the Shin household, she had to walk on eggshells, her every move restrained by propriety. Now, she could laugh, run, and gossip freely. She loved wandering the markets, eavesdropping on chatter, and most of all, coming home to tell me what she'd heard. And what she spoke of most often were stories from the Shin residence. I'd heard that Lu Yun had given birth to a baby boy. Madame Shin was overjoyed. But Shinru never once went to see the child. He told his mother, "You have what you wanted now. From this day on, please, don't trouble me anymore." The words were so unfilial that Madame Shin nearly fainted from rage. The child was never entered into the Shin family registry, and Lu Yun was left without a title. She went to beg Shinru, tears streaming down her face, but he sneered. "Didn't you once say you were content just to stay in the Shin household, without demanding anything? What's changed now?" Lu Yun broke down, unable to understand how the man who once favored her could now turn so cold. Mia spat in disgust. Serves her right. Lu Yun might have come from a noble family, but she threw away her dignity to become a concubine. She got what she deserved. Madame Shin, hoping to mend things with her son, began visiting more often. But when it came to Lu Yun and the child, she mimicked Shinru's indifference. In her eyes, Lu Yun's worth had been solely to prove her son could father a child. Now that proof existed, the woman and her son were both expendable. She began planning a new marriage for him, a proper one. Someone suitable, both to her liking and to his. Everything calculated carefully. But Shinru showed no interest. Every time she forced the matter, he fell to his knees and kowtowed until he fainted. A gesture so extreme it terrified her, as if he were cursing her in silence. Finally, Madame Shin grew uneasy. She began asking after me. When she learned that I was living well, at peace and untroubled, it unsettled her all the more. Mia told me everything she'd heard. Each time, when she finished, I handed her a cup of warm milk. "Well told," I said. She blushed, pouting. "My lady, I only bother to listen because you enjoy hearing it. Admit it, you like these stories." I smiled and nodded. Yes, I do." We both laughed, sipping our milk. Back in the Shin residence, I'd already loved milk. Now, home again, I loved it even more, drinking it daily in generous amounts. Uncle Chu, who had followed my father for decades, sometimes grew nostalgic and demonstrated old martial forms in the courtyard. Watching him made me happy, it was as if I could glimpse my brothers again. So I joined him, and he gladly taught me what he knew. Mia, excited, trained with us too. Once, Lu Chiji arrived while we were practicing. Curious, he asked to learn as well. Thus, Uncle Chu found himself with 3 disciples, each with different temperaments. I preferred strength and balance exercises. Mia adored lightness techniques, claiming they made her feel like a fairy gliding through clouds. Lu Chiji, on the other hand, wanted only one thing, moves that could incapacitate an opponent instantly. Uncle Chu frowned, calling such techniques too ruthless. Lu Chiji replied that he dealt with dangerous men daily, and such skill was vital for self-defense. Hearing that, Uncle Chu relented. He turned to me and said, "Better he strike first than let evil men strike again." I found the reasoning sound, though I couldn't help feeling wary of Lu Chiji afterward. Then came Shinru's letter. A formal invitation to meet. I was surprised. 8 years of marriage, ended by a court decree through the Ministry of Justice, had made the Shin household the laughingstock of the capital. Our ties, mine, his, and the Marquisite's, were completely severed. What could he possibly want now? Borrow money. Impossible. Even with the compensation he'd paid, the Shin Estates Foundation was too deep to be shaken. Over the years, I'd arranged for capable stewards to manage the businesses once held under the Shin name. Many had since flourished. Madame Shin knew nothing of this, but Shinru did. There were also land revenues, untouched. The compensation barely scratched the surface. His losses were only social, his pride. As I pondered his intentions, Mia speculated brightly. Maybe the young master wants to reconcile. I heard since you left, he hasn't touched another woman. Once, Lu Yin even undressed and climbed into his bed, he caught her and threw her out naked into the corridor. Reconcile. I laughed. You're bold to even think it. She meant no harm. Mia loved gossip for gossip's sake. Yet her words lingered in my mind, not out of longing, but curiosity. After all, we had shared many years together. Before the divorce, we'd truly been husband and wife, in every sense. He had a strong appetite, more than most. In the early days, I could scarcely endure it, drinking tonics daily just to keep up. Later, his vigor softened, but the habit remained, night after night. There were times I'd even considered finding him a concubine, like Empress Zhang's son persuading Emperor Taizong to take more consorts for peace's sake. But each time I imagined him with another woman, a deep ache seized me, sharp and suffocating. I could not share my husband. So I endured in silence. That was when I began drinking milk and taking restorative herbs. Something to calm the bitterness inside. Now, nearly a year since our divorce, and he still hadn't taken another woman. I couldn't help wondering. How does he bear it? Just curiosity. Pure, harmless curiosity. Under his tutelage, I had once come to enjoy such intimacy. Even after the divorce, I sometimes dreamt of those nights with him. And him. How had he endured? They say curiosity kills the cat. I never thought Shinru would actually drug me. Before I could even exchange pleasantries, just a few sips of tea made my head spin. He lifted me into his arms, trembling with emotion. Mingzhu, he murmured, I only let you go home for a while. Between us, it's not over. Then he kissed me, desperate and feverish. I wanted to push him away, but my limbs had no strength. He carried me into the back courtyard of the tavern. I thought bitterly, so this is how it ends. He spoke between kisses. I missed you to madness. I can't stand it anymore. We must be together again. I wanted to curse him, but couldn't even form the words. I wanted to hit him, but my hands were heavy as stone. His face was flushed, foolish man, he'd drugged himself too. I could only tell myself, let it be. Pretend I was bitten by a dog. Or worse, pretend I had paid for a night with a courtesan, but the thought sickened me. As if reading my disgust, he whispered against my ear. I'm not filthy, Mingzhu. Since you left, I've bathed every day. I am clean now, completely pure. His voice quivered with sincerity. I've cleansed my soul too. For the past year, I've lived only on the memory of us. I couldn't reply. I only looked at him, detached, empty. He began tearing at my robe. I shut my eyes. And just as I resigned myself to fate, Shinru collapsed onto me. Song Gang appeared. I had nearly forgotten, I still had my shadow guards. He now reported directly to Uncle Chu. Uncle Chu, fearing for my safety, had ordered him to follow me secretly. He struck a nerve on my neck, darkness swallowed me whole. When I awoke, the drug was gone. Mia was feeding me medicine, muttering through tears. My lady, why didn't you take me with you? You almost fell into his trap. I didn't answer her complaints, only said, call for a physician. The old physician was one Uncle Chu trusted, skilled, discreet, long retired, and respected my late father enough to come. When he entered, I dismissed Mia and asked directly. Forgive me for being improper, physician. I know you've purged the poison, but tell me, why do I keep feeling drawn to men? He wasn't surprised. Your pulse is unusual, he said. Like an animal in heat. Has your diet changed recently? Milk. The thought struck me at once. My father once raided the Man tribes and discovered their princesses drank cow's milk daily, strong, fertile, and rarely ill. Thinking of my frail health, he'd brought back a special breed of cows used for royal women. I'd always hated the smell, but Uncle Chu occasionally brought milk to the Shin estate for me. After the divorce, I drank it even more, 2 caddies a day, heated by Mia to remove the odor. The old physician stroked his beard, nodding. That explains it. The Man tribes prize fertility above all. Their royal cows are carefully bred, their milk stirs the body's desires, quickens the womb. My face burned. I covered it with both hands. After a while, when the heat subsided, I asked weakly, "Then what should I do?" He smiled kindly. "Don't fight it. You're young and healthy. The best cure is balance, of yin and yang." I hid my face again, mortified. He quietly excused himself. Later, Uncle Chu learned of it. Without a word, he brought me a stack of portraits, young men from noble families across the capital. He had already visited the Minister of Justice. The minister, in turn, had petitioned the emperor. The Gua line now had only one surviving heir, me. For my family's loyal service, they requested I be allowed to establish my own household, and bear a child who would carry my mother's name. The emperor hesitated. The empire was at peace, he had no wish to see the Gua family rise again. But remembering I had been childless for 8 years, he relented. He granted me the title Princess Youngla, without stipend or court duties, merely to make future marriage arrangements easier. It won him favor among the people, who praised his grace toward a fallen general's daughter. But it also earned me a new reputation, lustful, shameless, corrupted by desire. Of course, under the author's pen, my second sin was lust. In the novel, Mingzhu had forbidden Shenru from taking a concubine, but couldn't stop him from bringing Lu Yun into the household. In rage, Mingzhu took a man of her own, vowing revenge. From then on, every night in her courtyard was filled with wanton pleasure. The author despised her, used the cruelest words to brand her as lewd, disgraceful, the ruin of womanhood. I'd argued with the author before being cast here. I said she wrote Mingzhu that way because she herself longed for freedom but lacked the courage to take it, so she punished her creation instead. Enraged, the author had gone further, making Mingzhu sleep with dozens of men. Petty woman. But now that I was here, I rewrote her tale. The moment Shenru betrayed me, I divorced him. I did not become debauched. I did not roam the streets buying men. I chose only one. One who had helped me once. Lu Qiji began visiting again for dinner. This time, I welcomed him warmly. He sat eating ox tripe, looking oddly tense. I poured him wine, the vintage Uncle Chu had stored for years, opened only tonight. My intentions were no secret to Uncle Chu and Mia. They were all delighted, even saying that Lu Qiji was far better than Shenru. I asked, better in what way? They thought for a long moment before answering. His mother is a good woman. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Lu Qiji sat there with a composed expression. Sharp as ever, he quickly sensed my amusement and my detachment. He hardly touched his food before excusing himself, leaving in haste. I didn't stop him. The bait was cast, now all that remained was to see whether he'd take the hook. If he did, good. If not, it didn't matter. Whenever I had free time, I flipped through the sketchbook Uncle Chu had given me. The number of drawings kept growing, yet in my mind, I saw only Lu Qiji's face. On the 3rd day, he came uninvited. He sent Mia and the servants away, then pulled me into his arms. His embrace was tight, his tone accusing. You're bold indeed, a woman who's already had a husband, daring to seduce me, a man still untouched. Yet even as he spoke, his hands told another story, slipping under my robe, tracing heat across my skin. Men are such contradictory creatures. He had clearly longed for me, and yet pretended to be outraged by desire. I smiled inwardly and wrapped my arms around him. Still, he muttered stubbornly. You were married once, why should I choose a woman like you? He talked too much, and most of it was unpleasant. So I silenced him with a kiss. He froze for an instant, then retaliated, biting gently, devouring. He pushed me down and held me close, trembling, burning. I stopped him, my voice low. Luchiji, do you truly wish to give your purity to me? I didn't care about his so-called virginity, but I did cherish men who kept themselves clean. In this world, few did. Most men frequented brothels or filled their households with concubines. A man like him, untouched even into his 20s, that was rare and worthy of respect. He glared at me, then kissed me again. He may have lacked experience, but instinct guided him well, too well. That night, we discovered pleasures neither of us would forget. The next morning, I thought he would be gentler, perhaps more affectionate. Instead, he sulked. My pure body, stolen by you, truly, what a wicked woman. I laughed lightly. All right, didn't I already pay the ministry 1,000 taels? That seemed to appease him. He grinned, tugged my hand. In that case, once more. I rolled my eyes, yet somehow, I still yielded. The milk I drank lately made me restless, my skin warm, my thoughts scattered. And since that day, Luchiji began visiting often. Mia called him Kojia, young master, and he never corrected her. Even Uncle Chu treated him as such, discussing affairs of the household with exaggerated politeness. Luchiji enjoyed the role far too much. When I'd been with Shinru, we had studied together how to please one another, in both mind and body. From him, I had learned much. And now, I applied that same knowledge to Luchiji. Every time, he trembled as if he would collapse, yet afterward he always teased. With skills like yours, I ought to thank your former husband, he trained you well. At first, I took it as a jest. But repeated often enough, it grated on me. How childish he was. I didn't need him, so I began to pull away. When he came, I found excuses to avoid him. Twice I refused to see him. By the third time, he couldn't bear it. I thought he'd gone, until I returned to my chamber and found him waiting inside. Before I could react, he pulled me close and kissed me fiercely. How could you be so cruel? Ignoring me like this. I shoved him away. Didn't you once scorn me for having a former husband? Then go find yourself a pure maiden and marry her. He froze, then laughed softly, pressing his face into my neck. So you're angry. I was only jealous. Thinking of you spending 8 years with Shinru, it drives me mad. If you don't like hearing it, I won't say it again. He held me, coaxing, and I, foolishly, let my heart soften once more. Afterward, he sighed. With you beside me, who else could I ever want? Who could compare to you? For this life, I wish to stay with you. Wish. I repeated coldly, pushing him off. He hastily corrected himself. No, I vow. I willingly vow. How lucky I am, to be bound to you in this life. I smiled faintly. What a pity, for Uncle Chu's notebook. What notebook? He asked immediately. I brushed it off, pretending not to hear. But Luchiji, of course, would not let it go. In the end, I handed him the notebook. He flipped through the pages, astonished, then muttered, truly courting death. Before finishing, he began tearing each page apart. I tried to stop him, but the icy look in his eyes froze me where I stood. One by one, the pages burned to ash, 34 names of suitors reduced to cinders. Turning back to me, he said coldly, from now on, there's only me. Understand? Feigning reluctance, I nodded. His expression softened slightly. Author, come out and reason with me. I've divorced, I'm free, I fell for someone new, and I'm living as I please. So tell me, where exactly is the sin in that? 3 months after we began seeing each other, Luchiji brought his mother to formally propose marriage. The moment I saw her, I gagged, truly gagged. The bowl of wonton noodles I'd eaten that morning came up in a rush. The room fell silent in stunned discomfort. Luchiji's eyes reddened with shame and anger. Do you despise me because my mother was a concubine? He demanded. His mother, once a farm girl with a gentle face, had caught the Duke's eye. He wooed her with sweet words and jewels, keeping her in secret as a mistress to secure an heir. She did bear him a son, but never sought a title. Her only wish was to raise that son well. To me, she was a dignified, admirable woman. So no, I didn't despise her. I hated Lu Yun, yes, but that didn't mean I despised all concubines. I tried to explain, but before I could speak, another wave of nausea hit. Lu Qiji clenched his fists, nearly shaking with frustration. I didn't have the strength to argue. Fine, I thought. If he wants to leave, let him leave. His mother, however, was calm. She had noticed something unusual. Gently, she told him to stay quiet, then asked Uncle Chu if there was a physician in the residence. Call Physician Zhao, she said. When I carried Qiji, I was the same, so sick I could barely stand. Her words fell like thunder. Uncle Chu, Mia, and I froze in disbelief. Song Gang reacted first, rushing to summon Physician Yu. The physician took my pulse, then blinked, checked again, and again, before exclaiming. Congratulations, Lady Mingzhu. The pulse indicates joy, you are with child. It was as if lightning struck a second time. Everyone stood speechless, Lu Qiji and his mother both stunned, half delighted, half dazed. Finally, his mother regained her composure, helped me sit, and handed me a cup of tea. Lu Qiji tried to move closer, but in his nervousness, tripped twice before reaching a chair. Uncle Chu sighed and helped him sit properly. It took a long while for me to come back to my senses. In the novel, the author had written that Mingzhu's third sin was infertility. That was the most damning part of her character. In the original story, Mingzhu and Shunru never conceived a child. Later, no matter how many lovers she took, she remained barren. But me, after only 3 months with Lu Qiji, I was pregnant. An unexpected twist. But what truly intrigued me was something else. Whose child was Lu Yun carrying? I wanted to find out, but Lu Qiji watched me too closely. He said, forget it. Whether that mistress's child is his or not, it's his concern, not ours. All he cared about was marrying me. I, on the other hand, treated it lightly, teasing him. When he pressed, I finally told him I had no desire to marry. He stared, incredulous. What woman doesn't want to marry? His mother spoke up calmly, I didn't want to either. He turned to her, confused. Why not? She answered firmly, if you marry, you'll enter the Duke's household. You'll no longer be my son, you'll be that princess's son. I carried you for 10 months and nearly died bringing you into this world. Why should I hand you to another woman? I nearly dropped my teacup in shock. Could this peasant-born woman also be a transmigrator? No, she wasn't. She simply explained, in my village, every child belongs to one mother. Rich or poor, they must be raised by the woman who bore them. Lu Qiji turned to me. And you? Why won't you marry? I replied, because marriage leads to divorce, and divorce is troublesome. He laughed. You're already thinking of divorce before the wedding. I'm not Shinru. I'd never treat you as he did. His mother interrupted dryly, don't believe him. He's still the Duke's son. Didn't his father lie to me, too? Lu Qiji groaned. Mother, please. You're sabotaging me. She waved him off. You think marrying a wife is that easy? Seeing his exasperation, she finally relented and said no more. I took a sip of tea. Your mother's right. You're your father's son. Like father, like son. If I have a daughter, and she grows up only to be deceived the way I was, we'll end up divorced again. How tiresome, for both of us. Lu Qiji snapped, enough. Don't destroy the father-son bond before it begins. Father and son. I glanced at his worried gaze, fixed on my belly. and couldn't help but laugh. I had no desire to marry again. Madame Lu, the mother of Lu Qiji, stood on my side. Lu Qiji had taken his mother's surname, and she saw nothing wrong if my child were to bear mine in the future. But Lu Qiji disagreed. "You're both being childish," he said sternly. "A child without a clan's protection will suffer endlessly in this world." Madame Lu said nothing, only looked at her son with sorrow in her eyes. Her gaze made me fall silent too. I thought of myself. If not for my parents and 5 elder brothers shielding me, when Shinru took another woman, how long could someone with my temper have survived quietly in his household? The thought made me tremble. I placed a hand on my belly, my heart wavering. Yes, a child did need a father's protection. But then I thought, how many children in this world truly have fathers? And even if they do, what of it? So I remained firm. I would not marry again. In the modern world, single mothers were nothing unusual. If they could do it, why couldn't I? I held an imperial decree in my possession, permission to bear a child under my own surname. I had the Gua general's estate, Uncle Chu, Songgang, Nia. Heaven's favor, earth's shelter, and loyal people by my side. I was lost in thought when I met Lu Qiji's serious gaze. "Don't overthink it," he said firmly. "Our child must belong to a family, and that means a father." His eyes burned with determination, he would not yield. I glanced at Madame Lu. She only sighed, shaking her head helplessly. In truth, Lu Qiji could be maddeningly obstinate. But I didn't believe he would actually force me to marry him. Until he proved me wrong. He went to see the old duke, his estranged father, and struck a bargain. He agreed to acknowledge his father and return to the family register, on one condition: the duke must petition the emperor for an imperial marriage decree. He wanted me as his lawful wife. The old duke clasped his son's hand, tears falling. "My lifelong wish," he said, "is to hear you call me father." He rushed to the palace to make his plea. The emperor, long sympathetic toward the duke, who had endured the princess consort's tyranny for years, was more than happy to help him reclaim his dignity. The moment the duke finished speaking, the emperor granted the request. A decree was issued. Lu Qiji was formally entered into the duke's genealogy under the name Min Qiji, appointed heir to the ducal house. Another decree followed, an imperial marriage edict bestowing me upon him as his wife. It was said that when the princess consort saw the decree, she fainted on the spot. But Lu Qiji refused to live in the ducal residence. "I will acknowledge him as father," he said, "and take the Min surname, but nothing more. The rest will be negotiated." The duke asked what else he wanted. Lu Qiji answered simply, "That depends on my wife." The old duke's face twisted in outrage. At that moment, his patriarchal authority was truly gone. And so, Lu Qiji and I were married. The wedding was far grander than my first. I had not wanted such extravagance, but Lu Qiji said, "This time, we must include my mother's share." At his words, a faint ache stirred in my heart. I agreed, and Uncle Chu threw himself joyfully into the preparations. "This time," he said, "all of the capital shall know, General Gua's daughter, once divorced, has married a man even greater." And to the public eye, he was right. From a marquis's heir, my new husband was now heir to a ducal house. Mia was ecstatic. "My lady," she said with a mischievous grin, "if you divorce this one someday, you might as well marry the crown prince next." I shuddered at the thought. I had married hastily before to avoid that very fate, to escape the crown prince's hand. The emperor had only one son. For reasons no one could explain, 2 beautiful parents had produced a prince both hideous and vile. He was a man consumed by debauchery. I had once chosen Shinru precisely to avoid that marriage, never expecting that, after all these years, I would still live under the shadow of the East Palace. Neither Mia nor Shinru had ever known this. Shinru always believed I'd chosen him because I was moved by his devotion. In truth, before marrying him, I only had 2 impressions of him. First, that he was handsome enough. Second, that his proposal was earnest. After marriage, he treated me well. I had once drowned happily in that gentle affection. But once I awoke to the truth of this world, I no longer let emotion rule me. I regarded our relationship with clarity, felt gratitude clearly, sorrow clearly, without illusion. He treated me kindly, I repaid it consciously. He hurt me, I accepted the pain with reason, not passion. My determination to leave Shinru, and my refusal to enter the Eastern Palace, came from the same truth. I would not let myself suffer again. As for Lu Qiji, he clung to me as if I were his anchor in this world. More than once, he rested in my arms, whispering, "You are my home, Mingzhu. My family. I would rather die than hurt you. I will never let go. Never leave you." His obsession with the idea of family ran deep. No one could destroy it. Not his parents. Not even the emperor. When word of my remarriage spread, Shinru begged to see me. He tried everything, pleading, writing, bribing servants, but Lu Qiji sealed every path. He had spies hidden throughout the city, not a single movement in the Shin household escaped his notice. Driven to madness, Shinru tried again and again, but Lu Qiji never gave him the chance. Not until 3 months after my wedding, when my belly had already begun to show, did Lu Qiji finally relax. "I understand men," he said. "Even the most infatuated one loses all interest once the woman carries another man's child." But he had underestimated Shinru. That day, Mia and I stepped into a tavern. And there he was. Shinru. When he first saw me, his face lit up, but when his eyes fell upon my belly, he froze. Tears welled in his eyes. Mia rolled her eyes. Crying again. Honestly. Compared to my new husband, she had even less patience for the old one now. I could understand Shinru's shock. My pregnancy meant one thing, he was the one who couldn't father children. So whose child was his cousin Lu Yun carrying? Sure enough, Shinru broke down, voice trembling. "Mingzhu, so it was me who couldn't have children." Mia pulled out a chair for me as the waiter brought tea. I sipped slowly, waiting for him to calm down. When he finally did, I recounted everything, about the milk, about physician-used diagnosis. Shinru's voice was heavy with regret. "The milk. If you'd started drinking it earlier, if we had waited just a few months more, maybe we could have had a child." I shook my head. No. It depended on more than medicine. It depended on peace of mind. In the Shin residence, I was never at ease, always burdened with fear and expectation. At the Gua estate, I'm free. No anxiety, no bitterness. He clenched his fists, a habit he had whenever he felt remorse. I spoke softly, "It was fate, Shinru. Don't dwell on it. Our bond was only meant to last so far." He couldn't accept it. "And what about you and Lu Qiji? How much fate do you have with him?" Without thinking, I rested a hand on my stomach. "He's the father of my child. We'll share this life together." His eyes flared with fury. "And if one day he betrays you, would you still refuse to divorce him?" I smiled faintly. "If that day comes, of course I'll divorce him. But even if we part, for the child's sake, we'll remain connected." He asked hoarsely, if back then it had been me, if I had stayed faithful, could we have lived together forever? I answered truthfully, "If you had truly been loyal to me, we could have been happy for life." His shoulders slumped, despair clouding his face. "Then, if you and Lu Qiji ever divorce, could I marry you again?" His eyes were filled with desperate hope. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "I will never remarry." He blinked, astonished. "A woman, never to marry again." "It's possible," I said simply. He looked disbelieving. I smiled. "Have you forgotten? I'm a princess of the realm. I can establish my own household. My child will inherit my name and estate. He stared. You'll take the child with you. Will Lu Qiji agree to that? He's not like other men, I said. He'll agree. Shinru frowned. Not like other men. Thinking of Lu Qiji, I couldn't help but smile. Yes. The world binds women with chains. Others tighten them, but he breaks them. He lets me breathe. Shinru still looked unconvinced. Mingzhu, you've idealized him. Strip away the illusion, and he's no different from anyone else. I answered evenly, there's no illusion. Everything I've said is truth. He once tried to dissuade me from divorcing you, but when he saw my resolve, he defied pressure to help me instead. He mocked me for being once married, yet overcame that prejudice to wed me. He says he's jealous, but he still lets me meet you without question. With every word, Shinru's expression shifted, from disbelief, to pain, to a dark flush of humiliation. At last, he sighed. Mingzhu, you're pregnant now, but what if you still can't give birth? What if his family pressures him? Wouldn't he take another wife too? I shook my head. He won't. Lu Qiji told me, his home is where I am, not with his mother or any other. Shinru stared, stunned. I said proudly, Lu Qiji truly is different. He fell silent, lost in thought. After a long pause, he murmured. Perhaps he's different now. But how can you be sure he won't become like me one day? I'm not betting on it, I said. If he changes, I'll divorce him too. At the mention of divorce, Shinru's tears fell again, streaming down his face like rain. Mia and I were both taken aback. Just then, a sharp voice rang out from inside the tea house. You're a grown man, what's with all the crying? Crying, and crying again. Lu Qiji emerged, glaring at Shinru with disgust. Shinru's spirit broke completely. Soon after, men from the Shin estate arrived to escort him away. Feeling a pang of guilt, I followed Lu Qiji back to the Guo residence. I thought he'd be angry. But then he pulled me down beside him on the bed. I was the first to speak. Thank you, Qiji. Without you, I might never have faced Shinru again. I couldn't help but laugh at the sour look on Lu Qiji's face when I mentioned Shinru. He pouted. You know, we already have a child, yet you still went to see your ex-husband. Have you really not forgotten him? I took his hand gently. It's not that I haven't forgotten, I said softly. I just wanted that chapter to truly end. Otherwise, he would keep longing, and one day, if our child ever hears of it, they'll be confused. He turned to look at me. So you went to see him, for the child? I nodded. Overjoyed, he wrapped his arms around me and kissed me, nearly giddy. I pushed him lightly. The child can hear you. He sighed, collapsing backward. Mingzhu, you once said, if I ever betrayed you, you'd divorce me, and never remarry again, right? I nodded again. He frowned. Just because of my mistake, you'd punish yourself like this. That's not you. I smiled faintly. Not remarrying isn't a punishment. My parents once hoped I'd never marry at all. My brothers too, they didn't want me to. Qiji blinked in surprise. What do you mean? So I told him everything, from the hasty marriage to Shinru, to the teachings of my parents and brothers. For 8 years with Shinru, I had never shared this. Many times I'd wanted to confide in him, but whenever I was about to speak, the words would fade away, perhaps because there had always been a wall between us. But with Lu Qiji, I found it easy to open my heart. When I finished, he grew quiet, visibly moved. He brushed his hand over my belly. If it's a girl, he said, we'll never make her marry. We'll raise her ourselves. I laid my hand on his. But she won't have 5 older brothers to rely on. One day, we too will be gone. Qiji fell silent. I stroked his hair. My mother bore 5 sons before she had me. Perhaps I'll be the same, perhaps I'll bear sons first. He nuzzled into my palm. Still, we can't take chances. If it's a girl, we'll plan ahead. Plan ahead. But no matter how carefully one plans, life never unfolds as expected. Better to teach her strength, real strength, than to pave the road before her. I hadn't understood that before. Raised in comfort, sheltered by my parents and brothers, I'd taken everything for granted. I'd never once thought about what would become of me if they were gone. Thankfully, I'd awakened in time. Otherwise, 8 years of marriage might have broken me completely. I'd have lost myself to resignation, accepting Shinru's concubines one after another, living each day in silent humiliation. But now, I lived differently. I gave birth safely to our daughter. The moment she cried out, Luchiji became a man of tears. Every night, he sat by her cradle, watching her sleep. His mother, overjoyed, laughed through her tears. At last, she said, gazing at the little girl, I can stop worrying that someone will take my son from me. It had been her secret fear for years. The Duke, on the other hand, wasn't pleased. But the princess, relieved beyond measure, celebrated by eating 2 extra bowls of rice. When Madame Shen heard the news, she scooped up her long-forgotten grandson, showering him with kisses. So she bore a child, did she? She sneered. Good thing she divorced him, turns out she couldn't even bear a son. Mia fumed at her words, but I simply squeezed her hand and smiled. What does my life have to do with theirs? At the Gua estate, our daughter grew up adored, perhaps too adored. She became a little headstrong, a little willful. Always by her side were 2 boys slightly older, Dian and Shaoan, twin brothers Qiji had brought in. He said a girl should have brothers to protect her. But something about it unsettled me. One day, our daughter made a small mistake, not serious at all. Yet the twins leapt to defend her, insisting she'd done no wrong. It struck me then, this wasn't protection, it was indulgence. And indulgence would ruin her. That was when it dawned on me, this was another version of Guofu. My daughter was Guofu, and Dian and Shaoan were De Wu and Xiao Wu. By then, Lu Qiji had been promoted to Deputy Minister of Justice, his power rivaling even that of Guojing. And I, as a titled princess, commanded my own loyal retinue from the Gua household. A position not unlike the famed Huang Rong, leader of the beggar sect. At first, I didn't intervene much in my daughter's upbringing, it was mostly Qiji's domain. But once I realized how his methods were steering her astray, I reclaimed the right to teach her myself. He resisted at first. I reasoned gently, I'm her mother. Some lessons are easier from me than from you. As his duties grew heavier, he eventually relented. My daughter, under my stricter guidance, was far from pleased. She rebelled often, running to her grandmother, her father, or the twins to complain. But I held firm. To calm her, I began telling her stories, the return of the Condor heroes. Children love tales, and she was soon enchanted. When we reached the part where Guofu cut off Yang Guo's arm, she burst into tears. I don't want to be a girl like that, she sobbed. I just want to be a little willful, but not hurt anyone. I explained to my daughter that when one is young, being willful causes little harm. But if that same temper remains when grown, the consequences grow heavier with it. She nodded, and from then on became much more obedient. I was raised with love, yet I also understood reason. Lu Qiji believed that since our daughter had no brothers to protect her, she should grow strong and defiant, so no one could ever bully her. But that wasn't love. That was harm. Because no matter how defiant one is, there will always be people and powers one cannot fight against. Our daughter was clever. She feared turning into Guofu. By the age of 11, she had changed on her own, from a proud, stubborn girl into a well-mannered young lady. Even the old duke, who had always disdained daughters, praised her. He called her the perfect granddaughter. When the empress heard of her, she sighed with regret, saying that she had missed her chance with me, and now set her sights on my daughter. The crown prince's son, now of marriageable age, was not unattractive. But his nature mirrored his father's, lustful to the extreme, far worse than the crown prince himself. Lu Qiji went pale when he heard. "So that's why your father was so desperate to marry you off back then," he muttered, half in horror. He began investigating the crown prince's household. Over the years, the prince's harem had grown so vast he had to build an annex just to house them. The crown princess, daughter of the Grand Chancellor, was known for her patience and tolerance. Yet she saw her husband only once a year. Her position was precarious, she had conceived the heir on her wedding night, and since then, the prince had never touched her again. The crown prince ignored his son, the heir apparent, just as he ignored his countless other children. Lu Qiji sighed. "The crown princess may not be beautiful, but she's the wife fated to stand beside him for life. To be so disregarded, that's pitiful." I sighed too, hoping my own daughter would never meet such a fate. Qiji let out a long breath of relief. "Thank the heavens your father acted early. Otherwise, you'd have suffered the same." Then his tone hardened. "The crown prince hasn't ruined only his wife's life, he's destroyed countless women. If all he did was collect them and ignore them, that would be bad enough. But he..." His jaw clenched, his voice darkened, and his eyes gleamed cold. Lu Qiji was not a gentle man. He had always dealt mercilessly with evildoers, unflinching in punishing the guilty, so much so that criminals and their kin cursed his name. Since his promotion, he'd survived dozens of assassination attempts, sending every would-be killer to their graves with his own hands. That ruthless decisiveness had earned him the trust of the Minister of Justice and his appointment as Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Law. Yet I had rarely seen him look this way, a look he reserved only for the most heinous crimes. Worried I might be frightened, he stopped speaking. But curiosity gnawed at me. I began to ask around quietly, until I learned the truth. And what I heard left me trembling. Mia whispered, horrified. "The crown prince, he's terrifying. His cruelty defies belief. Aside from the crown princess, the chancellor's noble daughter, none of the other women in his harem had any such protection. 3 months after his wedding, the prince brought 7 more girls into the palace. All daughters of minor officials, no higher than 5th rank. Mia told me, voice shaking. He had them all laid side by side, and entered each chamber one by one. That night, the crying never stopped. Blood soaked the bedding. By dawn, all 7 were ill, 2 were dead from fever. Uncle Chu clenched his fists, his voice thick with rage. Even girls from the pleasure houses, just 14, if they were pretty, were taken into his household. Not one survived a full year. Song Gang's face was ashen. The crown prince once violated a woman of 50, and even a child of 9. I nearly fainted. My heart pounded uncontrollably. I ran through the house in panic until I found my daughter, safe in the courtyard, practicing sword forms under Uncle Chu's guidance. Only then did I breathe again. My second brother had once told me, the crown prince is not good, and urged my marriage swiftly. Now I finally understood why a calm, deliberate man like him had been so urgent. He had said the prince was hideous, but that had been a lie to frighten me away. He knew my fondness for beauty, so he called the prince ugly to make me recoil. In truth, the prince wasn't hideous at all. He was a nightmare in human form, a destroyer of women. The embodiment of every twisted perversion a man could contain. What made him even more terrifying was his intelligence. He kept his cruelty veiled behind a veneer of restraint. He ignored the crown princess, giving the chancellor no reason to complain. He never touched other noble daughters. Only preying on women without protection, those whose disappearances raised no alarm. He never laid hands on prostitutes directly. Instead, he brought them into his household first, ensuring that the law could not touch him. A predator, brilliant, deranged, untouchable. No wonder the Ministry of Law had found no evidence all these years. No one dared accuse him. And who would care about what happened inside the Crown Prince's private residence? Had it not been for a casual remark from the old duke mentioning his granddaughter, these horrors might never have reached my ears. When I understood it all, I nearly lost my mind. That night, Lu Qiji returned to bed looking utterly exhausted. Since the day we married, no matter how late he came home or how weary he was, he always made sure to lie beside me. He used to say that I was his anchor, his source of strength, that only by my side could he feel peace. I understood. It was his way of clinging to the warmth of a home he'd never truly had. His mother had loved him, but she could never protect him. I, on the other hand, had given him more than comfort, I had given him refuge. He clung to me, and I, foolishly perhaps, let him. Even our daughter had once tried to compete for me, jealous of the time her father stole from her, but she could never win. Tonight, he took off his outer robe and shoes, not even bothering to wash, and collapsed onto the bed. He was that tired. Fearing he might fall asleep before I spoke, I sat up and called softly. Qiji. My voice startled him. He shot up, clutching his chest, suddenly wide awake. I didn't mean to frighten you, I said, but there's something I must tell you now. He straightened, wary. Qiji, I said slowly, marriage is not the path for Mingwei. Our daughter. He froze. I know, I continued, that you've been searching for a suitable match for her. But that is not her way. The circumstances that made my own marriage possible, they can never be repeated. He fell silent, then muttered, then what are we to do? This time, the Empress won't let her slip away. Indeed, the Empress had fixed her sights on my daughter, just as she once had on me. I never understood why she targeted only the daughters of the Gua family. In my youth, I was the sole daughter of General Gua. Our family's military might could have bolstered the crown prince's power. But Mingwei, she had only me, a titled princess in name, and a father who was but a deputy minister of justice. Her grandfather, the duke, was aged and without real power. Yet the Empress was obstinate. Once her mind was set, reason held no sway. I took Qiji's hand tightly. Then we must fight differently, I said. The emperor is old. Qiji, help the eldest princess ascend the throne. He went still, then paled. Lu Qiji was ruthless toward individuals, yes. But when it came to matters of the realm, he'd never dared think beyond his duties. But I, Gua Mingzhu, daughter of General Gua. Raised in the shadow of strategy and command, I dared to think of such things. Only that way, I said, can our daughter truly be free. Only then will every woman in this empire have a chance to choose her own fate. The eldest princess, daughter of the late emperor and empress, had been born when they were old and was their only surviving child. Her mother's clan, a century-old family from Jiangnan, held vast influence. And she was my fifth brother's confidant. Years ago, she had disguised herself as a man, become a disciple of my father, and trained beside my fifth brother. Their bond had always been deep. Qiji blinked in confusion, then laughed awkwardly, trying to mask his unease. He pulled our newborn son closer, his expression melting into boyish joy. All right, he said with a grin, you rest now. I'll take care of our two little treasures. Mingyue leaned in curiously to peer at her baby brother, her eyes wide. Father, she asked, was I this tiny when I was born? Lu Qiji chuckled and kissed her forehead. Yes, exactly the same. This little one looks just like you did, it's miraculous. Mingyue frowned. I don't think I was ever that ugly. Qiji laughed, ruffling her hair. Not ugly at all, just beautifully red and soft, see? Adorable. She looked at him with the most skeptical face, then turned away in mock offense. At that moment, another sharp pain seized me. I gasped, it still hurts. Qiji's smile vanished. Alarmed, he rushed after the midwife. The woman pressed her hand to my belly, then froze in shock. How strange! She exclaimed. There's another one. What? I cried, stunned. Another child. Moments later, the pain surged again, fierce, unstoppable. And then, with a single cry, a frail, tiny boy slipped into the world, landing right in Lu Qiji's trembling hands. He stood there, stunned, eyes wide, mouth agape, before finally pointing and blurting out. Mingzhu. This one came too fast. I barely blinked, and he slipped right out. I glared at him through the haze of exhaustion, half furious, half amused. Too fast. Do you not see how much I've suffered? He laughed nervously, hurrying to cradle both newborns, shushing them gently. I couldn't help but laugh too. In that moment, breathless, aching, surrounded by new life. I felt a sweetness so complete it almost hurt. As if every storm, every betrayal, every tear had led only to this. Peace, quiet, and a happiness that truly belonged to us. Lu Qiji was radiant with joy. But before his delight could settle, the old duke heard the news and came rushing in. Tears welled in his clouded eyes. He dropped to his knees and bowed to the heavens, murmuring, "Thank the heavens above, at last, the duke's line has an heir." Qiji wanted to decline the title. And the old duke had never planned to pass it to the daughter of the princess consort. Though the new empress had made clear that women could inherit. The duke clung to his own stubborn beliefs. Qiji proposed that one of the children bear my family's name instead. But I refused. The empress already knew too much about the Guo family's private army. And such a connection could endanger our descendants. After some thought, he let it go. The Guo forces had never been bound by bloodline alone. They were held together by legacy, and by a shadow network of merchants, who quietly used their fortunes to protect Guo soldiers and their kin. Uncle Chu managed that network now, with Mia assisting him. Both loyal only to me. When our twins reached 1 month old, we held a modest celebration. After the feast, Uncle Chu suggested to Lu Qiji that Mingwei, our eldest, should travel and see the world, so she wouldn't be naive when she came of age. Qiji agreed, secretly sending guards to protect her along the way. The Guo family's inheritance would pass to Mingwei. Before she left, I took her hands and said, "The burden on your shoulders is not light." She hugged me tightly. "Mother, I understand. I'll continue to aid our soldiers. But not just those of the Guo army." I nodded in pride. My daughter, graceful in manner, sharp in thought, valuing both justice and advantage. A perfect heir for a merchant legacy. She teased before leaving. "Mingchang will inherit grandfather's title, I'll manage the wealth. But don't forget Mingxin, or she'll start a cult of her own someday." I glanced toward our youngest, still sleeping with a smile on her lips. "Don't worry," I whispered. "Each child has their own fate. She won't be left behind." Under Uncle Chu's guidance, Mingyue thrived. Mia's letters from the road told of her brilliance. Sharper even than mine. "A man like Shinru," Mia wrote, "wouldn't survive one stroke from her." Qiji laughed when he heard, asking, "Will Mingyue ever come home to marry?" I smiled faintly. "She'll have children, yes, but likely on her own terms. Perhaps even as a single mother," I thought. One day, Mingyue's letter arrived, bold and spirited. "Earning money is far too fun. I must keep doing this." When Mingchang grew older, the old duke moved into our home to personally train his grandson. We didn't object. The man had served 2 reigns and survived both with honor. He would be the best teacher. Mingyue roamed happily through her travels, while Mingchang stayed close, clinging to the duke's side. Lu Qiji, now Minister of Justice, took Mingxin everywhere, his little shadow. Once, Mingxin looked up at me and said, "Mother, power is wonderful. It can crush evil. I want to be like father." I was silent for a long while. The only wish I'd once held, that our children live free of power's burden, was slowly being reshaped by their father's influence. Mingxin matured swiftly. And before long, she caught the eye of the new empress. This empress, once a general who fought alongside the Gua army, had been wounded in battle and could bear no children. She had no consort, only loyal guards. One day, she summoned us to court. She told Qiji plainly to give her Mingxin, that she would raise the girl as her heir. Qiji and the old duke objected fiercely. But soon the empress summoned me alone. She confessed that she had once loved my fifth brother deeply. And when he died, she saw me as his last living bond. This empire, she said softly, I intend to leave it to your bloodline. I was speechless. How could I refuse, knowing where her heart lay? My 5 brothers had all perished in war, leaving no heirs. Perhaps, through my children, our family's spirit could live on. When Mingchang heard, he was overjoyed. Mother, if my sister becomes ruler, she'll restore the Gua name. Let me lead our troops once, just once. Qiji frowned. Your duty is to the duke's seat. Your grandfather's wish deserves respect. The old duke adored Mingcheng fiercely, lavishing upon him every resource his father had once been denied, as if to make amends for the past. When Mingwei received the news, she simply laughed in her letter. So my sister's a ruler now. Then my men and I shall become her most faithful believers. I couldn't help but laugh too, wiping tears from my eyes. Mingxin would not only protect the women of the realm. She would rebuild it, shaping a nation where justice ruled, where girls could grow without fear, and where power no longer belonged solely to men. To protect a daughter, the Gua family had proven a truth the world had long ignored. Raising them well was not enough. One had to build a world in which they could live freely. The end.